funding for today's video is brought to you in part by College Board. I don't have anything to say about College Board, but College Board. And special thanks to viewers like you. Thank you. Hello and welcome to today's video on the potential possibilities curve, or the PPC curve, which represents a fundamental aspect of microeconomics, economics, and macroeconomics. The concept of scarcity boils down to human wants being unlimited, while resources such as land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship are limited. And since these four key resources are limited, that means that the goods and services that stem out from those resources, being land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship, are also limited. Because of this concept of scarcity between the four resources of land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship, economies must make a trade-off between the production of goods and services, and this trade-off results in opportunity cost, which is the best potential profit foregone as a result of trade-off of the productions of goods and services.
Think, if you produce goods A and B and want to produce more of good B, you have to shift your resources to produce more of good B, which will in effect produce less of good A.
Let's put opportunity costs into an example. So this economy would produce either apples or carrots. And as you can see in the chart, if they produce 10 apples, then they produce 0 carrots. 8 apples, 1 carrot. 6 apples, 2 carrots. It goes on until you get 5 carrots produced and no apples. And so the opportunity cost for carrots is 2 apples, and for every 1 more carrot produced, you lose the ability to produce those 2 apples, which show that the opportunity costs for carrots increases as you make less apples, and vice versa. Expanding on the examples of apples and carrots, you have this, which is the chart, and then look at this graph.
Look at this graph.
As you can see, the graph is linear. So at the top of the y-axis, which represents carrots, you have the 5 carrot production with 0 apples, showing the trade-off between 2 apples for 1 carrot produced. And it's a downward sloping linear line. And so on the x-axis, which represents apples, the arrow is pointing to represents the 10 apples that are produced when 0 carrots are produced, which represents opportunity cost. And if you would plot the points of the chart on the graph, you would find that it's a linear trade-off, which means that the opportunity cost is constant. The main application this has to macroeconomics is if you replace apples and carrots with capital and consumer goods, then you get the basic PPC curve of an economy of a nation, which capital goods are traded off for consumer goods and vice versa. Similarly, the line of the curve, which is bowed outward representing increasing opportunity costs, represents efficient production. Any point on the curve would be inefficient use of resources, no matter what the opportunity cost is. The red dot, which represents a point inside the curve, represents inefficient usage of resources. So let's say you're under the rate of unemployment, but there could be more people that are employed. Similarly to the red point, the teal point shows that the point at which it lies at is outside of the efficient means of production, meaning that it's unattainable because of the resources that are needed to reach that point are currently unavailable. Like I've said, the key difference in this graph and the previous graphs is that this graph, because of the bowed out curve, shows an increasing opportunity cost, not linear. The four factors of production, land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship, determine whether the curve shifts outwards, which means that there is an increase in either one of these four factors of production, or if there's a decrease in one of these four factors of production, as represented by the magenta line and the lime line. The outward shift from the normal line to the magenta line represents that the unobtainable teal dot opportunity cost is now obtainable because the resources used to obtain that are now available, meaning that there's an increased opportunity cost plus increased output. The inward shift from the regular line to the lime line, which intersects with the red dot of inefficiency, means that the less efficient production is now the new efficient due to uncontrollable factors such as an uptick in unemployment. Maybe there's a war that went on that destroyed most of the land and capital, or due to some other extraneous events. So, how does this concept of opportunity cost and possibility productions curve applies to other curves? When a possibility productions curve shifts outward, representing an increase in output, it's reflective of an inflationary gap as reflected in the Phillips curve on the left, or it's reflective of an inflationary gap reflected into the ADAS curve on the right. The same can be said as the inverse. If it shifts inward, and by A I mean the possibility productions curve, then it represents the recessionary gap as pictured in the Phillips curve. And while it's not pictured in here, it is a representative of a recessionary gap on ADAS. And then there's also the concept of absolute and comparative advantage. That's if comparing two nations or two entities or two firms and seeing how their opportunity costs relate to one another and see who has the absolute advantage, which means who can produce the most with less resources, and who has the comparative advantage, which means who can produce the most with comparing the resources used to one another. Thank you so much for watching this video. I couldn't have done this without the help of my partners, Isabel Hartley and Emma Cathell. And this is the class of 2024 0-hour AP Macroeconomics signing out.